Oh, hello. I have been asked over many years, what's the size of the US market for B2B sales? I've done this mostly for SaaS companies, but I've put together a small presentation where we can see the size of the American companies, the size of the market, as well as its sales models, cost of acquisition, and something about the sales cycle. So just for starters, the US has 29.5 million active companies as of 2016. Those are the companies that actually handed over to the IRS their earnings for that year. Now, of those 29.5, 23.8 million companies actually have no employees. They're kind of contractor companies, if you want. They have 0 employees and their average revenue per year is about $46,000. So in fact, active companies with employees in the US, there are 5.7 million companies that have a range between 1 and over 10,000 employees. As you can see, the vast majority has less than 10, and you would get some very dwindling numbers after 500 employees. But as you can also see, companies with over 10,000 employees, there are almost 2,000 companies with over 10,000 employees in the US. And that's a huge difference from most companies outside the US, with the exception perhaps of China. The size of companies in the US varies from micro, small, medium-sized businesses, or SMB, to small, mid-size enterprise, and then enterprise companies. Now, all of these have ranges. Now, the micro SMB, the sole contractor, is a 0-employee company that does under $50,000 and has 24 million, almost 24 million of those businesses in the US. As you can see, small SMB has less than 50 employees, does between $100,000 and $10 million in the US. Most companies are that you know of are small SMBs. Obviously, the brands are all tied to enterprise or mid-size enterprise. And mid-sized SMB would be between 50 and 100 employees, revenues between 10 million and 50 million US dollars per year. There's 154,000 of those types of companies in the US. Now, mid-sized enterprise are really companies who have a huge impact as service companies in society. So most hospitals are mid-sized enterprises, for example, in the US. So mid-sized enterprises are companies who will either are growing very fast or are companies who have been established as service centers all across the US. They range from universities, hospitals, insurance companies that are small, and small banks as well. So mid-sized enterprise would be between 100 and 1,000 employees and doing business of about 50 million to about $1 billion per year in the US. Of those, there's about 41,000 businesses. An enterprise over 10,000, over 1,000 employees, sorry, over $1 billion, there's almost 3,000 of those in the US. Now, the decision making for purchase in the US varies tremendously, but as it does in any country that has, big companies and small companies, the bigger the size of the company, the more levels of decision making there are. And there are different types of techniques you can use to handle that increasing size of company decision making, right? But also, please pay attention to the last line. The sales model varies according to the company size as well. And I'll go into that in a while. Now, total purchasing power in the US for B2B is about $12 trillion a year. That's a huge sum, bigger than any other nation in the planet. and it's all divided up into all of these verticals. I outlined a couple here. But pay attention that about over half of those purchases happen on the enterprise side, companies with $1 billion plus of revenue per year. And we've had a lot of success going to verticals. And these verticals, they range from automotive to advertising and so on. The more focused you are on a vertical, the highest the chance of success in that vertical. And that's because people from that vertical react very positively for stuff that you do that says you're focused. So you say you have a solution for the automotive industry, the automotive industry will pay attention. So it's very important when you start to find out what your niche is, if you haven't got one, and go for that niche. Now, we came up with a sales matrix actually made famous by a US professor named York, where the higher the complexity of the sale, the higher the price. So if you take a lot of time to open up the client, if you need a lot of help, if you need a lot of support for the client, you need to onboard, then you can't really have a self-serve model. You should either go raise your price and go from self-serve to transactional to enterprise, depending on what level of complexity and price you're looking for. I'll give you some examples in a while. So the important takeaway here is you do not want highly complex sales and very low price, because that will put you in a graveyard position, meaning your cost of acquisition is higher than the lifetime value of your product. So if you're looking at cost of acquisition in the US, from the freemium model, which goes all the way up to light touch sales, high touch inside sales, field sales, and so on, you will go from $2 to $15 for freemium, like Netflix, and then move up slightly as you move towards the transactional model. The transactional model means you need somebody on the line to actually help the person close the deal. And then enterprise, which means you've got to visit multiple times the company and so on. Well, the cost of acquisition obviously accrues over time, and that means that the higher the cost, normally the higher the time as well. And this is what you see here on the second slide. The sales cycle can be from, for enterprise sales, from 1 year to 2 years, sometimes even 3 years, depending on the complexity of the sale. But as you can see, you can start, if you have a B2B sales model that is self-serve, you can start right away. There's very few of those, and I'll show you why in a second. Most of them go from the transactional model to the enterprise model, because that's where the money is. So here's a sales model, the price point graph I got from Latka. So the higher the annual contract value, meaning the higher the price, the lower the customer count, obviously. So it's important for you to see that Hootsuite, for example, has 16 million, well, we could call it B2B customers, because Hootsuite has a social media publishing platform for small businesses. But their annual contract value is around $9. It's really low. But they have 16 million customers. I think they're quite alone in that bracket. And then you go up, as you go up in price, you obviously then have fewer and fewer clients. It's important to note that if you go and have a look at this from the point of view of a logarithmic scale, you're going to see that most of these customers, most of these companies, they're going for the enterprise market, and a couple of them are trying to go to the freemium, low-touch sales model. And the reason for that is very simple. The reason is, once you look at the cost of sale and the size of the companies that are in that bracket, you either have to go for a high annual contract value, which means there are fewer companies in those, so you have to aim for mid-size enterprise to enterprise. You cannot stay in the mid-size because there are not enough of those mid-size SMBs for you to target those adequately. So you either go all the way down, which is where the scale is, or you go in terms of customers, or you go all the way up, which is where the scale is in terms of revenue. So generally speaking, there's not a lot in the middle there, between 500 to 5,000 annual contract value, really hard to find. And this is a characteristic of the US because of the polarizing scaling potential of each of these extremes, enterprise and, micro SMB and small SMB. That's it. That's my overview for the B2B sales market in the US. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.